Hey guys, I'm here with Samir from Sitar Service and Car Machine. Hi Samir, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, mate. Thanks for having me,
Thank
and I'm really excited to be talking with you guys. I think because maybe it just feels like this is a small taste of superstardom. I don't know.
Nice, thank you very much for being here. Yeah, if you can first of all just give us a bit of a background to yourself and then yeah, the bands and things that you're in.
I've been, I guess I started my musical journey in 2012. Um, I've always been a massive music fan, but in particularly like when I discovered Jimi Hendrix, like that kind of like changed my life, and it really like I didn't listen to anything for I think about like 5 years. I didn't listen to anything else except for just Hendrix, like finding all these bootlegs and all these versions of Foxy Lady and all these live versions of Voodoo Child and things like that. I just got really sucked into a deep hole of that. So once I'd discovered Hendrix, I just kind of like stayed in that mode. But then also growing up, I was very fascinated with Pakistani classical music or Hindustani classical music, as I guess it's called. But predominantly, what I was fascinated was the classical music from Pakistan. And so I just I've learned that not my whole life, but for a good portion of my life as well, and I think like that's my kind of musical like background, I guess. And I play with Car Machine, and I play with Sitar Service. Do like they're both Indian classical bass bands, but whereas in Sitar Service we take themes of the late 60s and the early 70s, such as like Black Sabbath or Spencer Davis Group, I'm a Man, like things like that. And we, I guess, transpose it into a Hindustani classical format. And then with Car Machine, we take a Hindustani classical music and then we turn that into a psychedelic rock format. So those are the two groups that I'm in. Very heavily influenced by the 60s, 70s Hindustani classical music and ragas and I guess rock as well.
Cool. And how do you find the reception in the UK of bringing sort of Hindustani classical music and mixing that and putting it out in England?
Well, I don't think that we are the first people like to do that. It would be very I don't want to use the word ignorant because that's like quite aggressive, but it'd be very like an aloof mentality to think um that Hindustani classical music hasn't been played in the UK or even in Europe like before, because we've had in the 60s we've had Ravi Shankar, and when I say we, I mean that as a collective, like from my Pakistani background and my British upbringing, notably my London upbringing. So like we've had Ravi Shankar from the 60s, and I mean his music, he had 7 decades worth of music, so he's been in the scene a long time, and he played at Woodstock. So that kind of presentation of Hindustani classical music, which was honestly, he was a true master. Like if you had all the masters of sitar sitting at a long table, Ravi Shankar would certainly be at the head of it. So what the I don't want to say the West, what America and Europe was exposed to, what they were exposed to, was a virtuoso of that kind of music, and it was thoroughly enjoyed, thoroughly reciprocated and accepted, like for sure. So I don't really feel something like I don't feel like there's a responsibility of being like, oh, I'm bringing Hindustani classical music and culture to the UK or the independent kind of thing. To feel like I am willing to um, not be afraid of utilizing my upbringing and my culture and my roots to that, and being able to present that. Like my pride mainly comes from um, trying my absolute best to stay authentic to who it is that I am, like being Pakistani, a South Asian British man, and having Pakistan like in my soul, and like you know, London, like in my heart. It's where I grew up, you know, it's where I was born and stuff. So that's really like how I view um, this presentation of our music that we make, because it's all dusted with psychedelic rock as well, you know. So like that's something that it, you know, it could be seen as a bit shocking, because it's like traditional music, traditional folk music, and you know, we've reimagined it with psychedelic rock kind of thing. So it gives a big like, oh, like kind of factor to it. I wouldn't say that we are the first band to do something like this, because I've listened to a lot of groups from Pakistan. The Mikael Hassan band, they're Pakistan's answer to prog, you know, and they are a bit more on the metal side, I would say, but they do Hindustani classical music and prog rock, you know. So even though maybe in the UK Karma Sheen may be one of the only bands that are doing it, it's not like we're the first band or something. But I guess maybe in the underground scene, like, you could say that we're the reference point for this music, because there's no one else for us to look back on in the UK scene, in the South Asian British UK scene, and be like, oh, these guys did that. So maybe if we're stuck for inspiration, can we can kind of like pinch off them and make something. Like, we're all doing it from, I guess, like my knowledge that I've acquired over the last 20 years or so, 20 years or so, yeah, things like that. So yeah, that's where I feel.
You've got an album coming out with both Car Machine and Sitar Service. What can you let us know about that album, those albums?
Yeah, so the Sitar Service album, um, it was a real, like, it was a real long time like in the making, and obviously like COVID happened and everything like that. We got an email actually from these two lads that were studying an internship at Abbey Road, at the Abbey Road Institute in Paris, and part of their course was to come to London, work at the Abbey Road studios, and record a band using the facilities there. And so it was just like a big turn of events, like, you know, those kind of stories that you hear, like, oh, and it just happened. You're like, how did it happen? It just happened because we played a show celebrating Woodstock's 50th anniversary at Handel and Hendrix. So obviously you can imagine, like, that was, my brain was exploded. The fact that I got to do a rendition of like Voodoo Child and Fire in Jimi Hendrix's bedroom, you know, on Brook Street, celebrating Woodstock. So that, first of all, was an absolute madness. But then I believe that we had the Mayor dancers with us who were performing whilst we were playing. So that was really exciting, and they were dressed in the clothes from this brand called the Hippie Shake, and the girlfriend of one of the guys saw that video on Instagram because the Hippie Shake posted it, or the Maya dancers posted it, one of those two, and then it just kind of happened in that, like, that chain reaction started, and then he emailed us. So we had an opportunity to then record a lot of the album at Abbey Road, and also Studio 13, which is the Damon Albarn studio on Latimer Road, Studio 13, and that was a trip in of itself. And the idea of the whole Sitar Service album was to create a swinging 60s, swinging London, you know, a swinging London of the swinging 60s, you know, that kind of era. So we've got some really like interesting songs in there, like songs from the Yardbirds. We also have Black Sabbath on there as well, and we've reimagined them in a Hindustani classical format that's made it really, I feel like it's made it very like interesting, like, for us. And I think, like, to top it all off, we've been lucky enough to work with the amazing drummer from, well, actually he's from like loads of bands. He's done loads of bands. He was in the Pink Fairies. He sat in for Hawkwind as well. He's done so many things. So his name is John Alder, and he goes by the name Twink. So we were super lucky to have to have played with him a few times already, and then asked him to do percussion like on the album as well. So currently we're working on that, and just the other day, like we'd spent about 12 hours in at Sausage Studios in Hackney, and best keyboard selection over there, the best drum sound. You know, we've got a 70s Ludwig over there, so it just sounds perfect, and range of guitars, all sorts of stuff, and real like wonderfully we're producing our album. So that's where we're at in regards to the Sitar Service album. And with the Car Machine record, like there's still like quite a few bits to do, but I can gladly say that we've finally done the backing. And I think the hardest thing about recording this was trying to capture our live energy, because I do find that I think I would like to say shocking. We're a shocking band live. I think because, you know, the way we're all dressed, and like, you know, we're all enthusiasts of the 60s and the 70s, so we kind of like dress like that as well, like like just this the level just below cosplay, you know. So but no one's turning up in a Wolverine costume, and maybe I should do that, I don't know. But yeah, like we're quite a shocking band, because it's got the Hindustani classical music, and it's got these loud guitar parts and these wonderful like rhythmic changes, and lots of atmospheric things that are tying it. So trying to capture all of that magnetism that encapsulates a lot of people, trying to capture that on a record. So far we've got all the backings done and stuff, but that is what has been the most challenging thing, to make sure that it's right. And I guess because I'm quite obsessive, and I'm so interested in the art of perfection, or I'm interested in the pursuit of perfection. So I have like redone like guitar parts like 20 times sometimes, and vocals like 64 times, and all that kind of stuff, just to make sure that it's right, and I am, I guess, in a way, like honoring my Hindustani classical teacher, my Ustad, Lataf Ali Khan Sahab. Like I just want to honor him as well, because he puts a lot of effort into teaching me and training me and stuff like that. So that's been the challenge, to try to honor the tradition of devotion to Hindustani classical music, and to make sure that the energy of live music is of our live performances are there. And we're doing both of those. That's also being done at Sausage Studios as well. No
Cool.
release dates yet, actually. So.
Cool. And how was it for you guys during the pandemic and lockdown? Did you manage to get to meet together as a band, or was it quite difficult?
Oh no, like no, none of us got to meet up at all, actually. I think I met up with one friend I met up with, and that was because restrictions had been eased, so you were allowed to travel on the tube, you know, still. And so he came down to see me, and we just had a lovely walk like everybody else was doing, in the sunshine and in the kind of at the I think, you know, with everything that's been going on, like I've said it, so I've said it a lot in this manner, so I feel like it's the truth. um like it has been sad with all the loss, for sure, and I can't speak for anyone else apart from myself personally, that I think the pandemic was probably, or the lockdown, being forced to focus, was probably one of the best things that could have happened, like for me personally, because I think without that I wouldn't have written all these new songs that we're recording and that we're currently playing, and being in this part of the group. um, it's kind of like, before, when I used to write music, I wrote everything that I was used to like playing, you know. So if I stayed in this kind of like box on the guitar, it was like all my riffs and all the solos and everything would now like come from here. So it was more like what I was playing rather than what I was imagining. So the distance between like the connectivity of what I was hearing and what I was playing was like this. But now, when I was in lockdown, and you know, I got into gardening like everybody else as well. But when I was in lockdown, you know, that gardening was very much inspiring me, and I was hearing a lot of more music, and I was imagining a lot more music like in my head, which was then forcing me to kind of bridge the gap from what I was hearing in my head to how I was playing to then now being about like here, you know? So this is the closest I've ever been to replicating the music that I hear in my head to actually like composing the music that I'm imagining, or music that I want to play, or music that I want to hear like on the radio. Like if I heard a group like this, I would be digging it, you know? And I feel like in that regard, in that respect, um, lockdown was I was quite not grateful for it, but I had a bit of empathy for the lockdown, I think, you know. And as a band, I didn't see the guys for a year. You know what I mean? I didn't see the guys for a year. It was so sad. Socially, it was horrible, but especially like in an industry like music, where it really, really requires and really depends on who you know. Like it really does. But it doesn't depend on like who you know in terms of um, how many people you know. It really depends on the quality of the relationships that you have. If you have good quality relationships with people and promoters and, you know, like bands that you want to play with one day, or bands that you've supported, or you know, like guys that work at labels, or it's not even guys that work at labels, just guys and girls that turn up to some industry networking events. Like there have been stories where you've met someone not really doing anything, but you've fostered a relationship because you're a kind person, and next thing you know, like they're a head of A&R at an independent label or something, and then they loved you so much that they help you out, you know. So the social aspect of our industry is so important, and not being able to see the guys for a year, not being able to actually go to gigs, for me is more like playing gigs, but not being able to play gigs and like greet people and talk to them and ask them for their opinion on what I could do better, or what we could do better, or what do they enjoy, and things like that. Like not being able to do that and spend time with my family outside in a restaurant or things like that. That was really tough. And as a band, there was just no opportunity to record in its entirety. At all, except for demos that I did on my laptop, which I'm speaking to you from now, like all the demos. So that it was productive in that thing, but only as an individual part. One positive though, definitely that did come, is this whole remote recording situation that really opened. It was very fascinating. It was a fascinating part of being locked in my studio for, you know, the 67th day, you know, in a row. It was quite interesting because then, you know, we were just all conferring with each other like on the phone, and you know, like through WhatsApp on the computer, and video chats like this and stuff, and being like, oh yo, so do it like this, do it like that, blah blah blah, and sending the files all to me, and I'm mixing it and all that. And with the Sitar service, we released something for the Maya dancers, which is on their Instagram, but it's also like on our Instagram on IGTV, where we did like a little lockdown jam and did this really like cheesy video of like all these squares and all that stuff, and this psychedelic background because the frames were just all on our phones and stuff like that. So it looked quite cool. Like, it didn't look cool at all, but I loved the process because like obviously we created it, so like yeah, obviously we're gonna dig it, we're not gonna say it's crap in it. But that's what that's one of the positive things that came out for me. We still in some capacity made music in sitar service, but with Car Machine, it's not that everything relies on improvisation, but back then everything was a lot more fluid in terms of how we played and stuff. So with Car Machine, I could only take the individual responsibility of just trying to get better as an artist and be a better songwriter for the group, and be a better musician in terms of my compositions and my techniques and things. So I think that's how I can explain how the lockdown was for me in that regard, and I guess for the band as a whole as well, considering that we hadn't seen each other for about a year, and maybe I think about a year and a half until we actually saw each other. That was it really.
And how does it feel to be back playing live and recording again?
Honestly, awesome. That's it. Like awesome. There's No amount, no, there's nothing. No, this is as much that needs to be said. It's awesome. Period.
Great. And what's the plan for going forward for the rest of this year in 2022?
We have a few gigs. As you know, like we're doing the show with you on the 20th of November in Dalston at the Victoria. So we're super looking forward to that. That will probably be one of our last gigs of the year, and I am pretty sure that it'll be the second last gig of the year before, like, I just want to go back and I want to make sure that I finish the album and everything, and for Machine, because even though there aren't any there's no provision for a release date yet, I just want to make sure that by the end of the year we've got the album done, and we've got the artwork done, and we've got all sorts of pictures and all things like that that we've needed to make better for the release of an album. And I'm just going to be locking myself away up in the lab because all the guys have done their bits now. So it's just about me redoing some guitar, adding some harmonium, and putting some vocals and stuff like that in other places, and so on and so forth. So right now, the only immediate goal I feel is to finish the album, and then to start planning not necessarily only a release, but planning various things in terms of not what promoters we want to play with, but like where we want to play, and are we going to curate our own show, or can we work with a promoter to help us curate a show where we're building like a small little team around us to then have a show somewhere else? Or are there any particular bands who we feel like we want to support, and are there any sort of I guess new ideas that we want to put in if we want to write songs or something? So I think at the moment where that's where we are, and most likely that's where we are with Sitar Service. Maybe if Sitar Service gets a gig or something like that here and there, we'll most likely we'll do that. But I think we are completely like all in the mode of, right, smash these gigs and then smash the rest of the recordings. So I think that's where we are, and just planning for 2022, and hopefully everything is going to be like open in a in a much wider capacity, and see where it is that we can go from there, man.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Samir. Thanks very much for talking to me today.
Oh no, listen, thank you so much for allowing me to be able to express myself about how I feel about our group and everything, and really asking us about it, because I think music for us, like, it's such a personal thing. It's so amazing, and to be able to talk about something that's so personal, and with someone like who actually cares about music as well, and who actually likes some of the stuff that we do, and it's a really humbling experience. So thank you, and like thank you to whoever else has been watching or will watch later. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you very much, Samir. And if you haven't before, check out Machine and Sitar Service. I will leave links as well in the description for you. Awesome.